All right, so we are reading Win Bigly by Scott Adams to Leon and commenting. We are on the Persuasion stack. This is on page 98. Some forms of persuasion are stronger than others. Here I am talking about the broad categories of persuasion and not the specific tools. Below, I rank for you the broad forms of persuasion by their relative power. The strongest are at the top. Notice that the emotional topics near the top are stronger than the more rational ones at the bottom. This is based entirely on my own experience as a persuader. The persuasion stack isn't science, so I recommend viewing it as directional. So here's the list. Big fear, identity, smaller fear, aspirations, habit, analogies, reason, hypocrisy, word thinking. As I will explain in more detail in an upcoming chapter, visual persuasion is stronger than oral persuasion, and most of the persuasion stack can be communicated either way. In practical terms, that means a visual presentation of a weaker form of persuasion could be stronger than a written or oral presentation of something higher in the stack. For example, visual persuasion involving a small fear would normally be more powerful than an academic discussion of a big fear that included no visuals. But if the communication method is the same, my ranking of the persuasion stack generally holds. I'll take you through the stack, starting with the weakest forms at the bottom. Word thinking. Word thinking is a term I invented to describe a situation in which people are trying to win an argument by adjusting the definition of words. In these situations, there is no appeal to reason. But that's okay, because facts and logic are not persuasive anyway. Word thinking usually happens when people are bad at logic but don't realize it. And that's most of us, most of the time. So you see, this is a form of non-thinking more than any other. You see it more. Got it. That's how that sentence is supposed to read. You see this form of non-thinking more than any other. The clearest example of word thinking is the abortion topic. Both sides are trying to win the debate by declaring their definition of life to be the accurate one. Most people agree that protecting human life is among our most important priorities. So if the anti-abortion folks can define a fetus as living, they win the debate without resorting to any actual reasons or logic. It's easy to see why people try to win debates this way, but the other side is unlikely to change their opinions just because someone adjusted the definition of a word. Word thinking simply isn't persuasive. As technology improves, we have to continually reassess what it means for a fetus to be alive. And that makes no sense at all. The current state of technology should make no difference to whether an entity is defined to be living or not. Both sides of the debate agree on what a fetus can and cannot do on its own. If I say the scientific description of a fetus fits my personal definition of what it means to be alive, and you say it does not, there's no place to go with that argument. Our best case scenario is a tie. We saw a lot of word thinking in the presidential race of 2016. At the beginning of the election cycle, we saw an ongoing debate about whether Donald Trump was conservative enough to be the Republican nominee. The people who said he was not a true conservative were trying to use the word thinking to eliminate Trump from consideration as the Republican candidate. The problem was that people did not agree on what it meant to be conservative, nor did the polls. Nor did the public think it was especially important for Trump's talent and policies to map to some underdefined political label. This was the blind spot in the Republican Party that allowed Trump to become their leader without being especially conservative. The entrenched interests in the GOP were doing word thinking, literally the worst form of persuasion, to protect themselves from a master persuader with an enormous stockpile of persuasion weaponry. It was never a fair fight. As a trained persuader, I could see this developing from the start. As long as the Republican establishment clung to the word thinking for their defense. They had no defense at all. The next one is hypocrisy. On television news shows these days, you often see pundits defending their side of an issue by saying their opponents do the same sorts of bad things or have in the past. This is a good way to fill television time, and it might add some information to the conversation. But it can never be terribly persuasive to the viewer. The problem is that it frames both parties as naughty children. There are no winners in the framing. I understand the impulse to cry hypocrisy. You don't want the other side to claim their brand is pure while branding your side as wrongdoers. So you have to sling back some mud, but the "your side did it too" response is weak mud. The stronger mud is what I call the hit the high ground maneuver. I talk about this in more detail in the how to use the high ground maneuver chapter, but you need a sneak peek at the concept now for comparison reasons. The high ground maneuver involves taking the conversation out of the children are bickering out of the children are bickering mode and reframe it as you, the adult in the room, explaining to the children how things work. Let me give you an example. Starting with the weak persuasion of claiming the other side is just bad. So the hypocrite accusation would be, pundit number 1, your side didn't do enough to end street violence. And then pundit number 2 said, well, don't forget that your side failed at it too. And the result is a tie. Both sides are bad. The high ground maneuver would be, pundit number 1 says your side didn't do enough to end street violence. And pundit number 2 says, I agree. Luckily, we have learned a lot since then. A number of cities experimented with different approaches, and some worked better than others. Let's try to find the best practice and see if we can spread them to other cities. The result is pundit number 1 is framed as the child who has nothing to offer but complaint, and pundit number 2 demonstrates an adult understanding of how to solve problems over time. So persuasion tip number 13 is use the high ground maneuver to frame yourself as the wise adult in the room. It forces others to join you or be framed as small thinkers. So notice I started by fully embracing the criticism from the other side. If you debate the criticism, you stay in a child frame. If you accept it and make a case for learning and improving, you move to the adult high ground and leave the children behind. Whenever you see claims of hypocrisy, you are also likely to see an opportunity for the high ground maneuver. All right, so next we'll go on to the next one, which is reason. Tomorrow. That's on page 103. See you then.